The dust devils danced across Main Street like restless spirits, swirling through Silver Creek's weathered buildings. Clara Whitlow pulled her shawl tighter against the morning wind, her basket of medicinal herbs weighing heavy on her arm. 22 years in this frontier town had taught her the rhythms of its prejudices as surely as she knew the cycles of desert blooms. "Clara!" Her mother's sharp voice cut through the general store's doorway. "Don't you dare wander past Miller's fence today. Those Apache been seen moving through Skeleton Pass again." The familiar warning settled into Clara's bones like an old ache. Every week brought fresh tales of Apache raids, stolen horses, burned homesteads. The stories grew wilder with each telling at the saloon, transforming shadows into demons, turning a proud people into nightmares that haunted settler dreams. "Yes, Mama," Clara murmured, but her green eyes drifted toward the distant mesas where the earth touched sky. Out there, beyond the town's suffocating boundaries, the world breathed free. Doc Hartley needed these herbs for his tinctures, and his cabin sat right at the edge of acceptable territory, close enough to Apache lands that most townsfolk refused his calls. But Clara had inherited her father's stubborn streak, along with his sandy hair, and fear had never been her master. The morning sun climbed higher as she walked, transforming the desert from purple shadow to blazing gold. Saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised in silent benediction. Clara knew every jackrabbit trail, every hidden spring within the safe boundaries. But today, something pulled her steps farther. Perhaps it was the eagle circling overhead, or the way the wind carried the scent of distant rain. Perhaps it was simply the weight of 22 years lived within invisible walls. Her feet found the deer path that wound through the red rocks, leading toward the forbidden territories. The basket grew lighter as she walked, her spirit expanding with each step away from Silver Creek's watchful eyes. Here, the desert showed its secret face. Tiny purple flowers blooming in rock shadows. Lizards with jeweled scales basking on sun-warmed stones. This was the world the town's fear had stolen from her. She should turn back. The sun marked noon, and Doc Hartley would wonder at her delay. But a streak of blue caught her eye. Mountain bluebirds, rare this far into the desert. They flitted through a narrow canyon she'd never explored, their wings like scraps of sky come to earth. Clara followed. The canyon walls rose around her, red stone carved by ancient floods into flowing sculptures. Her boots clicked against the rocky floor, the sound echoing strangely in the confined space. The bluebirds led her deeper, their song bouncing off stone until it seemed the earth itself was singing. Then silence fell like a dropped curtain. The birds vanished. Even the wind stilled. Clara's hand instinctively went to the small knife at her belt, a gift from her father before the influenza took him. The canyon suddenly felt less like wonder and more like a trap. A pebble clattered behind her. She spun, heart hammering, to find the canyon empty. But the quality of the emptiness had changed. It held weight now, presence. Someone watched her. "I mean no harm," she called out, surprised by how small her voice sounded against the stone. "I'm gathering herbs for the doctor." No answer came, but a shadow shifted high on the canyon wall. Clara's mouth went dry. The stories flooded back. Apache warriors who could move silent as smoke, who could track a man across bare rock, who showed no mercy to white settlers who crossed into their lands. She backed away slowly, fighting the urge to run. Running would mark her as prey. Her father had taught her that about predators. Meet them with steady eyes and steady hands. Another shadow moved, this one ahead of her. They had her surrounded. "Please," she said, hating how her voice shook. "I'll leave. I didn't know." A figure dropped from the rocks with a liquid grace, landing in her path without sound. Clara's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 summers, with lean muscle evident beneath his cotton shirt and leather vest. Traditional Apache dress mixed with trader cloth, marking him as one who moved between worlds. His hair fell past his shoulders, black as obsidian, held back by a red cloth band. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, dark and deep as winter pools, holding an intelligence that made the town's crude caricatures seem like childish scrawls. He studied her with the same intensity she'd seen in hawks before they struck. One hand rested on the knife at his hip, though he hadn't drawn it. When he spoke, his voice carried the rumble of distant thunder. "You are lost, white woman." It wasn't a question. Clara lifted her chin, finding courage in defiance. "I followed the birds." Something flickered in those dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. "The birds lead many to their death." "Then why haven't you killed me?" The directness of her question seemed to catch him off guard. His head tilted slightly, reassessing. Most white women would be screaming or fainting by now. This one stood straight-backed, meeting his gaze despite the tremor in her hands. "You carry medicine plants," he observed, nodding toward her basket. "You are a healer." "I gather for the doctor." Clara surprised herself by taking a step forward. "Do you know these plants? The healing ones?" Another flicker in those depths. "My people knew them before your people knew this land existed." The bitter truth of it stung, but Clara nodded. "I believe that. I wish—" She caught herself, aware of how foolish her wishes would sound to him. "You wish what?" "I wish I could learn the right way. The books from back east, they don't understand this land. They try to make it follow their rules instead of learning its own." Now she was certain that was surprise in his expression. He moved closer, and Clara held her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. He smelled of sage smoke and leather, of wind and wild places. "You should not be here," he said finally. "These canyons are forbidden to your kind." "My kind?" A spark of her father's temper flared. "You don't know what kind I am." "I know enough. I know your town shoots Apache on sight. I know your men ride through our camps, counting our children like cattle, waiting for excuse to drive us to the reservation." The truth of it sat heavy between them. Clara couldn't deny what everyone knew. "Not all of us," she said quietly, "though I guess that doesn't matter much when enough of us do." He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Go, follow your own tracks back. Do not return." Clara moved past him, acutely aware of his presence, of other eyes watching from the rocks. At the canyon's mouth, she turned back. He stood where she'd left him, a figure of stillness against ancient stone. "My name is Clara," she called out, not knowing why it mattered. He didn't respond, but she thought she saw him nod before she turned away. The walk back to Silver Creek passed in a blur. Clara delivered the herbs to Doc Hartley, deflecting his questions about her delay with mentions of a twisted ankle. At home, she helped her mother with supper, listening to her brothers argue about cattle prices, feeling like she moved through a dream. That night, she lay awake watching stars through her window, thinking about dark eyes and bitter truths. The townspeople spoke of Apache as if they were forces of nature, storms to weather, disasters to survive. But the man in the canyon had been achingly human, intelligent, proud, carrying grievances that had the weight of justice behind them. She thought about his hands, how they'd rested on his knife but never drawn it, how he'd noticed her healing herbs before anything else, how he'd let her go when every story she'd been told said he should have killed her. Clara turned onto her side, pulling the quilt her grandmother had made up to her chin. Tomorrow would bring the same routines, washing, mending, helping at the store, dodging the clumsy courtship attempts of ranchers' sons who saw her as good breeding stock. But something had shifted in that canyon. Some door had opened that couldn't be closed. She'd been warned her whole life about crossing boundaries. But what happened when the boundaries themselves were wrong? When the lines drawn in sand were meant to keep people apart who might otherwise find understanding? Sleep finally took her as dawn touched the eastern sky, and in her dreams, dark eyes watched her with something that might have been curiosity, might have been warning, might have been the first spark of something else entirely. The mountain lion's tracks were 3 days old, but Dakota still followed them through the wash. Not because he hunted the cat. This late in summer, prey was too scarce to waste on rivalry between predators. He followed because the tracks led toward the canyon where he'd encountered the white woman yesterday, and something restless in his chest demanded he check the paths again. His grandmother would call him foolish. "Nahasan," she'd say, using his childhood name. "The earth does not need you to guard every stone." But Dakota had learned long ago that vigilance was survival, and survival was duty to his people. The ND, Those the whites called Apache had held these lands since time before memory. Now they were pressed into smaller circles each season, watching their hunting grounds shrink like water in drought. The garrison at Fort Buchanan grew stronger while his band grew weaker, and every treaty signed seemed to steal more than it gave. He moved through the morning shadows, reading the desert's language in bent grass and disturbed pebbles. Here, a roadrunner had caught a lizard. There, coyote pups had played. And there, he stopped, crouching beside a clear boot print in the sand. The white woman had passed this way again. Dakota sat back on his heels, studying the track. She walked with purpose, but not stealth, her stride shorter than a man's, but steady. The print was fresh, perhaps 2 hours old. Dawn tracks, made while dew still weighted the sand. Anger flared in his chest. He'd warned her, shown mercy where his brother warriors would have shown none, and she repaid it with defiance. Did these whites understand nothing but force? Yet even as anger rose, curiosity tempered it. She'd been gathering medicine plants, knew enough to harvest lamb's ear and desert sage. Her eyes had held fear but not hatred, and when she'd asked about learning the proper way to use the plants, her voice had carried genuine hunger for knowledge. Dakota rose and followed her trail, telling himself he tracked a potential threat. The path led to a different canyon, one where spring water collected in natural tanks among the rocks. His people called it Tuhali, where water rises, and had guarded its location for generations. He heard her before he saw her. Soft humming echoed off the canyon walls, a melody he didn't recognize. White people's music. Yet it didn't grate on his ears like their usual harsh songs. This held something of the desert in it, rising and falling like wind through stone. Dakota scaled the canyon wall, finding a vantage point among the boulders. Below, the woman, Clara she'd called herself, knelt beside the largest water tank. She'd removed her boots and rolled her sleeves up, arms elbow deep in the clear pool as she harvested watercress. The morning light caught the copper threads in her sand-colored hair, twisted up but escaping in wisps around her face. She worked with careful hands, taking some plants but leaving most, replanting the roots she'd disturbed. It was how his grandmother gathered, how the old ways taught. A collared lizard skittered across the rocks near her, and she laughed, a sound like water over stones. "Good morning to you too," she said to the creature. "Don't worry, I'm not after your bugs." Despite himself, Dakota felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. He'd watched white women in the settlements, how they shrieked at spiders and scorpions, how they moved through the desert like it was an enemy to be conquered. This one spoke to lizards and touched the earth like it deserved gentleness. She stood, lifting her basket, and that's when she saw him. To her credit, she didn't scream. Her body went still as a rabbit sensing a hawk, but her chin lifted in that defiant gesture he remembered from yesterday. "I suppose you're going to tell me this place is forbidden too," she called up to him. Dakota dropped from the rocks, landing in a crouch before rising to his full height. "All of this land is forbidden to your people. You choose which warnings to ignore. And yet, you haven't killed me." She shifted her weight but didn't retreat. "That must frustrate you. You think killing brings me joy." The assumption stung more than it should. "You think we are the monsters your town makes us." Clara's cheeks flushed. "No, I'm sorry. I was trying to be brave and it came out stupid." Her honesty disarmed him. Dakota found himself stepping closer, noting how she stood her ground despite the quick pulse visible at her throat. "Why do you come back?" he asked. "Your doctor has medicine. Your stores sell herbs from the east." "Because they're wrong." Frustration colored her voice. "Willow bark from New York doesn't work the same as desert willow. Mint from Vermont can't do what canyon mint does. This land has its own medicine, but nobody wants to learn it, right? They just want to force it into patterns they already know. And you are different?" "I'm trying to be." She met his eyes directly. "My father used to say that wisdom meant knowing how much you didn't know, but everyone in town seems so sure about everything. Sure that your people are savage. Sure that our way is the only way. Sure that this land needs to be tamed instead of understood." Dakota studied her face, searching for deception. Among his people, he was known for reading truth in others. It was why the elders included him in treaty talks, despite his youth. But this woman puzzled him. She spoke like no white he'd encountered. "Your father was wise. he asked finally. He was a surveyor. Came out here to map the territory, but he said the land taught him more than he ever charted. Her voice softened with memory. He used to take me riding into the desert, show me things, animal tracks, the way plants grew near hidden water, how to read weather in the clouds. Mother hated it, said he was making me wild, but those were the only times I felt real. He is dead? 3 winters passed. Influenza. She adjusted her basket, looking away. Now I'm supposed to marry some rancher's son and forget I ever knew there was a world beyond fences. The bitterness in her voice matched his own when he thought of reservation boundaries, of limits placed by those who didn't understand. Without conscious decision, Dakota found himself pointing to her basket. You harvest watercress wrong. Her eyebrows rose. I do. You take the old growth, look. He moved closer, close enough to catch her scent of lavender soap and desert dust. See how these stems are thick? They are bitter, past their best eating. Take the young shoots here, leave the old to shelter the new growth. Clara leaned in, genuinely interested. Show me? For the next hour, Dakota taught her things his grandmother had taught him. How to harvest without harming, how to read which plants grew medicine strongest, how to thank the earth for its gifts. She learned quickly, asked intelligent questions, and wasn't afraid to admit ignorance. Your grandmother sounds wise, Clara said as they worked. Does she live at the reservation? Dakota's hand stilled. She walks with the spirits now, died rather than be caged. I'm sorry. Your people's sorrow changes nothing. No, Clara agreed quietly. It doesn't. They worked in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. When the sun climbed toward noon, Dakota stood. You should go. Your absence will be noticed. Clara gathered her things slowly, as if reluctant to leave. At the canyon entrance, she turned back. Will you be here tomorrow? The question hung between them like a drawn bow. Dakota knew he should say no, should forbid her return, should report this to the elders and let them decide. Instead, he found himself answering, I patrol many places. But sometimes here? He didn't answer, but something in his expression must have told her what she wanted to know. She smiled, a quick, bright thing like sunlight through clouds, and left. Dakota watched until she disappeared beyond the ridge, then climbed back to the high rocks to think. The wind brought the scent of coming rain, and with it, trouble. He could feel it like pressure in his bones. His younger brother, Kuruk, would rage if he knew Dakota had let a white woman live, much less taught her their grandmother's knowledge. The war faction grew stronger with each broken treaty, each forced relocation. And they weren't wrong. The whites took and took until nothing remained. But this woman, this Clara who talked to lizards and thanked plants for their sacrifice, she wasn't the enemy he'd been trained to see. She was something more dangerous, a bridge between worlds that shouldn't be crossed. Dakota stayed in the high rocks until sunset painted the sky in blood and gold. Tomorrow he would tell the elders. Tomorrow he would do his duty. But tonight, he allowed himself to remember the wonder in her eyes when he'd shown her the proper way to strip juniper bark, the careful way she'd repeated the words he'd taught her in his language. Tomorrow he would choose his people over dangerous curiosity. Tonight, he was simply a man who'd met a woman who saw the desert through eyes like his own, and the impossibility of it sat in his chest like a stone. The autumn moon hung like a silver dollar over the desert, casting shadows that turned familiar rocks into strange territories. Clara wrapped her father's old coat tighter around her shoulders as she made her way to the canyon. 3 months had passed since that first encounter. 3 months of secret meetings that had transformed from wary exchanges into something she couldn't name. She found him by the water tanks, as she often did these days. Dakota sat cross-legged on a flat stone, working on arrows by moonlight. His hands moved with practiced precision, checking each shaft for straightness, testing the balance. You're late, he said without looking up. Mrs. Henderson's baby came early. Doc Hartley needed help. Clara settled beside him, leaving careful space between them. A girl. They named her Rose. Another white child to grow up fearing shadows. The bitterness in his voice had softened over the weeks, but never fully disappeared. Clara had learned not to offer empty comfort for wounds too deep for words. I brought something, she said instead, pulling a small leather pouch from her coat. Tobacco. The kind my father said your people use for ceremony. Is it right? Dakota finally looked at her, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. He took the pouch, opened it, breathed in the scent. Where did you learn this? Found Father's journal. He wrote about trading with some of your people, years ago, before. She trailed off, before the fear set in, before the lines hardened, before the world shrank to us and them. It is good tobacco. He set it aside carefully. But why bring gifts? Can't I just want to thank you for teaching me? Nothing is simple between your people and mine. Clara pulled her knees to her chest, watching the stars reflect in the water. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different? Wonder changes nothing. But you do wonder. It wasn't a question. She'd caught him watching her sometimes with a look that mirrored her own confusion, her own dangerous curiosity. Dakota set down his arrow, his jaw tight. What I wonder is why I continue this foolishness. Why I risk my people's safety for what? He turned to her then, and the raw honesty in his face stopped her breath. For conversations with a woman who sees the desert as more than something to survive. For the way you speak to growing things. For how you learn our words like they are gifts instead of curiosities. The space between them suddenly felt both too vast and not vast enough. Clara's hand moved without her permission, reaching toward his face before she caught herself, fingers curling back. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know we can't. Can't. His laugh held no humor. Such a small word for such a large truth. They sat in silence, the weight of impossibility pressing down like the desert heat. Clara had tried to stop coming, had told herself each meeting would be the last. But something drew her back, not just his knowledge of plants and healing, but the way he saw the world, the way he challenged her assumptions, the way his rare smiles felt like sunrise. Tell me about your family, she said, needing to fill the dangerous quiet. You mentioned a brother. Dakota's expression darkened. Karuk leads our young warriors. He believes the only good white is one who stays far from our lands. He's not wrong to think that way. No, he is not. Dakota picked up a pebble, rolled it between his fingers. He remembers our father's death. Soldiers came to our camp, claiming we'd stolen horses. No trial, no questions. They shot him as he stepped from his dwelling. Clara closed her eyes against the pain in his voice. How old were you? 12 winters. Karuk was 15. Old enough to want revenge, too young to take it. That anger has grown with him like a twisted tree. And you. I chose a different path. Our grandmother said revenge was a circle that consumed itself. Better to be like water, find the way around rather than through. He threw the pebble into the pool, watching ripples spread. But water can also wear down stone, given time. Is that what you're doing? Wearing down stone? I don't know anymore. The admission seemed to surprise him. When I first saw you in that canyon, you were just another trespasser. Then you asked about the plants, and I heard hunger for truth in your voice. Not conquest, not possession. Just learning. My father used to say that learning was the only way to honor a place. You can't love what you don't understand. Your father sounds like he was unusual among your people. He was. Clara smiled at the memory. Mother never understood why he'd spend hours watching ant colonies or tracking storm patterns. She wanted him to focus on land claims and profit. He said the land would teach us how to live with it if we just listened. Yet your people do not listen. No, they're too afraid. She turned to face him. But I'm listening. Doesn't that count for something? Dakota studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a small object wrapped in deerskin. This is why I was late tonight. Clara took it carefully, unwrapping it to reveal a carved piece of turquoise, no bigger than her thumb. A bird in flight, wings spread, so detailed she could see individual feathers. It's beautiful, she breathed. Mountain bluebird, like the ones that led you to me. His voice dropped lower. My grandmother said such birds carry messages between worlds. When they choose to guide someone, it means the spirits have work for them to do. What kind of work? Understanding. Bridge building. Dangerous things in dangerous times. He paused. Keep it hidden. If your people saw it, there would be questions. Clara's fingers closed around the carving, feeling its smooth warmth. "And if your people knew you'd given it to me? That is my risk to take." She understood then what the gift meant, what line they were approaching. The careful distance they'd maintained suddenly seemed fragile as spider silk. "Dakota!" "I know," his voice roughened. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. My duty to my people, the war that comes closer each day, the blood already spilled between us. I know. But," he turned to her fully then, and in his eyes she saw her own struggle reflected. "But when you are not here, I find myself watching for you. When you laugh at the lizards or thank the plants in our language, something in my chest feels lighter. When you leave, the desert seems emptier." He shook his head. "I am a fool." "Then we're fools together." The words came out barely above a whisper. They sat closer now, though she couldn't remember moving. Close enough to see the pulse at his throat, to count the silver threads the moon wove in his hair. Her hand uncurled, the turquoise bird warm against her palm. "What do we do?" she asked. "I don't know. Meet when we can. Learn what we can. Try not to think about tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes anyway." His hand covered hers just for a moment, warm and calloused and real. "Then we face it as ourselves, not as White and Apache, but as Clara and Dakota who found something unexpected in a desert canyon." The touch lasted only seconds before he pulled away, but Clara felt it like a brand. They returned to safer topics: which plants would survive the coming frost, how to read weather in the flight of hawks, stories of his grandmother's wisdom. But everything had changed with that small carved bird, that brief touch, those admissions in the darkness. When she finally rose to leave, Dakota stood too. "Be careful walking back. The garrison has increased patrols." "I know. Mrs. Henderson said they're looking for raiders. There have been attacks on wagon trains to the south." His face closed off. "Not our band, but they will not care which Apache they punish." The reality of their situation crashed back. Out here, in their private world of stone and starlight. It was easy to forget. But beyond the canyon, their peoples moved toward conflict like storm clouds gathering. "When will I see you again?" Clara asked. 3 nights. Watch for the owl's call." She nodded, tucking the turquoise bird deep in her pocket. As she picked her way down the trail, she heard him call softly, "Clara." She turned. "The bird. It also means protection. In dangerous times, remember that." The words followed her home through the darkness, a promise and a warning wrapped in one. In her room, she hid the carving beneath loose floorboards with her father's journal, then lay awake until dawn, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it. Outside her window, a night bird called. Not an owl, but something wild and free, and unafraid of boundaries drawn by men. Clara closed her eyes and let its song carry her toward dreams where carved birds carried messages of hope across impossible divides. The first sign of trouble came with December's bitter wind. Clara noticed her mother watching her more closely, her brothers asking pointed questions about her evening walks. She'd grown careless, perhaps, humming Apache melodies while she worked, speaking to plants in words they'd never heard. "You've been strange lately," her brother Samuel said one morning, cornering her by the chicken coop. At 19, he fancied himself the man of the house since father died. "Martha says she saw you heading toward the Forbidden Canyons last week." "Martha Patterson sees many things that aren't there," Clara replied, scattering feed with steady hands despite her racing heart. "Last month she swore she saw the devil himself dancing on Miller's barn." "This isn't a joke, Clara. People are talking. People always talk. It's what keeps this town from dying of boredom." Samuel grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make his point. "If you're meeting someone, who would I be meeting?" She met his eyes directly, a trick Dakota had taught her. Never look away when speaking difficult truths or difficult lies. "You think I've got a secret beau among the rattlesnakes and scorpions?" He released her, but suspicion lingered in his eyes. "Just remember what happened to the Carlson girl." Clara's stomach tightened. Emma Carlson had fallen in love with a Mexican trader, tried to run away with him. Her father and brothers had caught them at the border. The trader was found dead a week later, and Emma hadn't spoken a word since, spending her days staring at walls in her family's house like a ghost of herself. That evening, Clara heard the owl's call but didn't answer it. She couldn't risk leading suspicious eyes to Dakota. Instead, she lay awake, clutching the turquoise bird, wondering if he waited for her in the cold. The next morning brought worse news. Colonel Mitchell from Fort Buchanan arrived with a dozen soldiers, their blue uniforms stark against the desert dust. Clara watched from the general store window as they gathered the town men in the square. "Apache raiders hit the Collins Ranch," the colonel announced, his voice carrying like a gunshot. "Burned the barn, stole horses. We tracked them to the northern canyons before losing the trail." Clara's hands fisted in her apron. The northern canyons. That was Dakota's band's territory. "It's time we cleared out that nest of vipers," someone shouted. Clara recognized Jake Morrison's voice, always the first to call for blood. "Drive them to the reservation where they belong." "Or further," another added, and ugly laughter rippled through the crowd. Colonel Mitchell raised a hand for silence. "We'll handle this properly, but I need volunteers who know the terrain. We ride out at dawn." Clara watched her brother step forward with the other young men, eager to prove themselves. Her mouth went dry as dust. She had to warn Dakota, but how? The town would watch her now, especially Samuel. The answer came from an unexpected source. Doc Hartley appeared at her elbow, speaking low. "Clara, I need yarrow and willow bark from the Eastern Springs. Might be our last chance before snow, and we'll need medicines if there's fighting." She looked at him sharply. The Eastern Springs were nowhere near the Forbidden Canyons, but they were on the way. Did he know? His weathered face revealed nothing, but there was something in his eyes. "Yes, doctor. I'll go immediately." "Take the long route," he said carefully. "Sometimes the plants grow stronger in difficult places." Clara gathered her basket and slipped out the back way, her heart hammering. The long route would take her past Skeleton Pass, where she might signal Dakota's scouts. It was dangerous. If caught, she'd be branded a traitor. But the alternative was unthinkable. She rode hard, her father's mare sure-footed on familiar trails. At the pass, she built a small fire with green wood, sending smoke signals in the pattern Dakota had taught her. Danger, soldiers, flee. She prayed someone would see, would understand. As she gathered the medicinal plants, trying to make her alibi real, hoofbeats thundered behind her. Clara spun to find Karuk and 3 Apache warriors surrounding her, and her blood turned to ice. She'd never met Dakota's brother, but she knew him instantly. The same sharp features, but twisted with rage where Dakota's held thoughtfulness. "So," Karuk said in accented English, "you are the white woman who corrupts my brother. I came to warn you. Soldiers, we saw your smoke, and we've seen you before, sneaking to meet Dakota like a coyote in darkness." He dismounted, stalking closer. "Do you know what we do to spies?" "I'm not a spy." "No? Then what are you? What hold do you have on him that he risks everything for stolen moments with our enemy?" Clara lifted her chin, finding courage in desperation. "I'm someone who sees your people as human beings, not monsters. That shouldn't be so rare that it corrupts." Karuk's hand moved to his knife. "Pretty words from a pretty liar. Your people gather even now to hunt us. Should I send them your body as answer?" "Karuk!" Dakota's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared from the rocks, moving to place himself between Clara and his brother. The two men faced each other, speaking rapidly in Apache. Clara caught only fragments. Her name, mentions of danger, accusations that made Dakota's face tighten with controlled fury. Finally, Karuk spat on the ground. "You choose her over your people?" "I choose to listen to her warning over your pride," Dakota replied in English, clearly wanting Clara to understand. "The soldiers come at dawn. We must move the camp tonight." "Because she says so? This could be a trap." "Look at her, brother. She risks everything to warn us. What trap is worth that?" Karuk's gaze raked over Clara again, and she saw him take in her genuine fear, the plant-stained hands that marked her as a healer, the way she stood her ground despite trembling. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "she seeks to save only you, her Apache pet." The words hit like physical blows. Clara saw Dakota flinch, saw something crack in his careful composure. "Is that what you think I am?" Dakota asked quietly. "After all we've survived together, you think I would betray our people for..." "For what, brother? Say it." The challenge hung in the air. Clara wanted to speak, to deny, to explain, but she knew this was between brothers, between Apache men deciding the fate of their band. Dakota straightened. For someone who sees me as a man, not a savage. Yes, but that doesn't mean I forget my duty. Doesn't it? Karuk gestured sharply at Clara. She should be dead. The old ways demand it. Yet she stands here knowing our faces, our language, our location. What else have you told her in your weakness? Nothing that endangers us. And she's proven. Proven what? That white women can be pretty, that they can speak sweet words while their men sharpen knives? Karuk turned to his warriors. We ride back. Prepare to break camp. And you, he pointed at Dakota, you end this. Now, or I will. The threat was clear. Clara's hand moved instinctively toward the hidden turquoise bird, a gesture that didn't escape Karuk's notice. His eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. You gave her grandmother's carving? The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Dakota didn't deny it, meeting his brother's gaze steadily. Then you are lost, Karuk said, his voice thick with disgust and something that might have been grief. When the soldiers come, remember that you chose this. He mounted and rode off with his warriors, leaving Dakota and Clara alone in the gathering dusk. For long moments, neither spoke. I'm sorry, Clara whispered finally. I've ruined everything. No, Dakota's voice was rough. This break was coming. Karuk and we've walked different paths since Father died. He chooses war. I still hope for another way. What will happen now? We'll move the camp. The elders will listen to the warning, even if Karuk questions its source. But after... He turned to her, and the pain in his eyes made her heart clench. He's right about one thing. This must end. Dakota, your people prepare for war. Mine sharpen their knives in answer. Soon there will be no safe places for meetings, no room for understanding between our kinds. He touched her face gently, the first time he'd allowed himself such intimacy. I would not see you caught in the crossfire. Clara covered his hand with hers, memorizing the calluses, the warmth, the impossible tenderness. And I would not see you hunted like an animal. Then we must be what we are. Apache and white. Enemies by birth, if not by choice. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But know this. Whatever comes, you changed something in me. Showed me that bridges might be built even across rivers of blood. Perhaps not in our time, but someday. Someday, she echoed, the word tasting of ashes and dreams. He pulled away, becoming the warrior again. Ride home, bar your doors. When the soldiers find our camp empty, they'll be angry. Keep your brothers from joining the hunt if you can. How will I know you're safe? He smiled, sad and beautiful in the dying light. Watch for bluebirds. If they return to your canyon, you'll know I remember. Then he was gone, vanishing into the shadows like smoke. Clara rode home through darkness, tears freezing on her cheeks in the December wind. Behind her, she imagined she could hear the sounds of a camp preparing to flee, of a people once again driven from their homes. In town, she found chaos. The colonel had advanced the timeline. They would ride tonight, hoping to catch the Apache sleeping. Clara watched her brothers oil their guns with eager hands and wanted to scream the truth, that they hunted shadows, that the real enemy was the fear that made monsters of men. Instead, she tended Doc Hartley's medicines and prayed wordlessly to any god that might listen. Her father's Christian deity, Dakota's spirits, the indifferent stars. That dawn would find empty canyons and living men on both sides of a war that seemed as inevitable as winter frost. The attack came 3 days later, not from the soldiers, but from Karuk's war party. They struck at dawn, hitting the Murphy supply wagons heading to Fort Buchanan. By noon, Silver Creek was in uproar. 2 drivers wounded, supplies scattered across the desert, and fresh fuel for the fire of hatred. Clara pressed cloth to Sean Murphy's head wound while Doc Hartley worked on the deeper gash in his side. The young man rambled in his fever, describing painted warriors appearing like ghosts from the rocks. Recognized one of them, Sean muttered, his eyes wild. The tall one with the scar. Seen him before, watching from the ridges. Clara's hands stilled. Karuk had a scar along his jaw. She'd noticed it during their confrontation, which meant Dakota's band was responsible, despite his hopes for peace. You're certain? Sheriff Watson pressed, having arrived to take statements. Certain as death, Sean gasped. That savage looked right at me before he struck, like he wanted me to remember. Clara forced herself to keep working, but her mind raced. This wasn't random. Karuk was forcing action, making peace impossible. And Dakota was caught in the middle. That night she heard urgent voices from the parlor. Through the crack under her door, she saw lamplight and shadows moving. Samuel's voice carried clearly. "Tomorrow night. Colonel says we know where they're camped now. One of the wounded drivers followed them part way." Her blood froze. They'd found the band's new location. "About time," another voice said. "Jake Morrison. Hit them hard while they sleep. Only way to deal with Apache." "What about women and children?" This from her younger brother Thomas, uncertain. "Nits make lice," Morrison replied, and several men laughed. Clara bit her fist to keep from crying out. She waited until the meeting dispersed, then slipped out through her window. The turquoise bird seemed to burn in her pocket as she saddled her mare in darkness. The ride to the canyons had never seemed longer. Every shadow could hide soldiers. Every sound might be gunfire. But she couldn't let Dakota's people be slaughtered in their sleep. Couldn't live with that blood on her conscience. She reached the narrow canyon where they'd last met, built her signal fire with shaking hands. The smoke had barely begun to rise when hands seized her from behind. "Foolish woman," Karuk's voice hissed in her ear. "You think we don't watch our own signals?" He spun her around, and she saw he wasn't alone. 3 warriors flanked him, arrows knocked, but it was Dakota emerging from the shadows that made her heart simultaneously soar and break. "Let her go," Dakota commanded. "So she can lead soldiers to us? She knows where we are now, brother. Your weakness has doomed us all. Clara, what are you doing here?" Dakota's voice held forced calm, but she saw the fear in his eyes. For her, for his people, for the impossible position between them. "They know where you are. The man you attacked, he followed you. They're coming tomorrow night to—" She couldn't finish, couldn't speak the ugly words. Karuk laughed bitterly. "You see? She admits her people plan murder, yet you still protect her. Because she risks her life to warn us." Dakota stepped between them again. Twice now she's known where to find us. Perhaps she marks our location for soldiers. Perhaps this is all part of their plan." "You know that's not true," Clara said desperately. "I would never—" "What I know," Karuk interrupted, "is that you've bewitched my brother into forgetting who he is, made him weak when we need strength." He turned to Dakota. "Choose now, brother. Kill her and prove your loyalty, or watch me do it." The canyon went silent except for the crackle of the signal fire. Clara saw Dakota's hand move to his knife, saw the war in his face. She understood then the full weight of what she'd asked of him with her very existence in his life. "It's all right," she said softly. "I knew the risk." Something flickered in Dakota's eyes. Pain, rage, decision. His knife cleared its sheath in one smooth motion, and Clara closed her eyes. The blade whistled past her ear to bury itself in the ground at Karuk's feet. "I choose a third way," Dakota said. "We break camp tonight, move deeper into the mountains where soldiers can't follow, but she comes with us." "What?" Clara and Karuk spoke in unison. "She's proven her loyalty. Her warnings have saved us twice. If she's willing to leave her people for ours, then we protect her as our own." "You've lost your mind," Karuk snarled. "The council will never—" "Then I invoke the old law. Trial by challenge. Face me for leadership of the war band, or accept my decision." The brothers stared at each other, years of conflict crystallizing in this moment. Karuk's hand went to his weapon, and Clara saw Dakota tense, ready. "Stop!" She stepped forward, breaking their locked gaze. "Don't you see? This is exactly what hatred wants. Brothers killing brothers, families torn apart. I won't be the cause of that." She turned to Dakota, memorizing his face in the firelight. "Thank you for everything. For showing me there was more to the world than fear. But Karuk is right. I don't belong here. I'll go back, try to delay them, give you time to run." "They'll know you warned us," Dakota said roughly. "What do you think your people do to traitors?" Clara thought of Emma Carlson's empty eyes, of the ugliness in Morrison's laugh. "That's my risk to take. Like you said, we must be what we are." "No," Dakota's voice cracked. "I won't let you." An arrow whistled between them, fired from the canyon rim. Then another. Clara heard shouts, English shouts. "Soldiers! one of Karuk's warriors yelled. They followed her. Everything erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed off canyon walls as blue uniforms appeared on the ridges. Karuk's men returned fire while scrambling for cover. Clara found herself pressed behind a boulder, Dakota shielding her with his body. They must have... I know, he said. Can you ride? She nodded, and he whistled sharply. His horse appeared through the smoke and confusion, trained to come at his call. He lifted her onto its back despite her protests. The old mine shaft, 2 miles north, hide there. What about you? I'll find you, go. He slapped the horse's flank, sending it galloping into darkness. Clara clung to its mane, tears streaming as gunfire and war cries filled the night behind her. The mine shaft was a black mouth in the mountainside, abandoned years ago when the silver played out. Clara huddled in its entrance, Dakota's horse standing guard, as she listened to distant sounds of battle. Hours passed. Dawn was breaking when she heard footsteps. She pressed deeper into shadows, hand on her father's knife, then nearly sobbed with relief when Dakota appeared. He was bloodied, his shirt torn, moving with the careful gait of the wounded. But he was alive. Your brother? She asked as he collapsed beside her. Lives, as do most of our band. Your warning gave us enough time to evacuate the elders and children. Only warriors remained. He closed his eyes. But 3 good men died, and now there can be no peace between us. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I was careful. Samuel followed you. The words hit like physical blows. Her own brother. He suspected for weeks, he said. Waited outside your window, trailed you like prey. Dakota's voice held no accusation, only exhaustion. He's the one who led soldiers to the canyon. Clara covered her face, shame and grief overwhelming her. Her brother had used her, turned her love into a weapon. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. What happens now? She whispered. Dakota was quiet so long she thought he'd passed out. Then, now you choose. They think you're dead. Samuel saw you fall in the crossfire, assumed the worst. You can stay hidden until the hunt passes, then return. Tell them you escaped, were held captive. They'll believe it. Or you come with me. The band moves to Mexico, beyond the army's reach. It won't be easy. My people will resent you, maybe always. You'll leave everything behind. But, he opened his eyes, found hers. But you'll be alive, and we'll be together. Clara looked at him, bloodied, exhausted, still offering her protection despite everything. She thought of Silver Creek, of the life waiting there. Marriage to some rancher's son, years of small talk and smaller dreams, always wondering what lay beyond the next ridge. Then she thought of Dakota teaching her to read the desert's secrets, of conversations that challenged and changed her, of a love that had grown despite every reason it shouldn't exist. She pulled the turquoise bird from her pocket, held it up to catch the morning light. Tell me, she said, voice shaking but certain, what does trial by challenge mean? And more importantly, she managed a trembling smile. How do I tell your brother in Apache that he's an idiot? Dakota stared at her for a long moment. Then, despite everything, the blood, the loss, the impossible future, he laughed. It started small but grew, echoing off the mineshaft walls like water breaking through a dam. You terrible, brave, impossible woman, he said, pulling her against him. Do you know what you're choosing? Yes, Clara whispered into his shoulder, breathing in sage and smoke and home. I'm choosing you, choosing us, whatever that means. He held her tighter, and she felt him press his lips to her hair. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away shadows, revealing a world forever changed by the night's violence. But here, in this moment, in this narrow space between worlds, they had each other. It would have to be enough. The rain came unexpectedly to the desert, transforming dusty arroyos into rushing streams. Clara pulled the deerskin cloak tighter around her shoulders, watching water cascade off the cave entrance where they sheltered. 3 weeks had passed since the night of gunfire and choices. 3 weeks of hidden camps and constant movement. You're getting better at reading weather, Dakota observed, joining her at the cave mouth. You knew this storm was coming before I did? The mice told me, Clara said, managing a small smile. They were gathering seeds frantically yesterday, and the wind smelled different, like wet earth from far away. He settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. These small intimacies had become their language. A brush of hands while passing food, fingers intertwined during night watches, the way he automatically positioned himself between her and any danger. "Kuruk returns today," he said quietly. Clara's stomach tightened. Dakota's brother had been scouting the southern passes, determining if the route to Mexico remained clear. His absence had been a relief. No hostile glares, no muttered curses when she helped the healers, no constant reminder that she was tolerated only for Dakota's sake. What will he say? The truth, whatever it is. Kuruk may hate many things, but he serves our people honestly. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and Clara thought of other storms, the tempest of her choice, the lightning strike of recognition that she belonged nowhere now except at this man's side. The Apache band had accepted her presence with varying degrees of reluctance. Some, like the elder woman Dahlia who led the healers, had begun teaching her their medicine ways. Others still watched her with suspicion, waiting for betrayal. "I dream about them sometimes," Clara admitted. "My family. I see my mother crying, Samuel carrying guilt like stones, Thomas trying to be strong but not understanding why his sister chose savages over blood. Regrets?" She turned to study his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way rain misted his dark hair, the careful control that never quite hid his emotions from her anymore. "No, but grief, yes, for the life that might have been if the world were different." "The world is what it is," Dakota said. "We can only choose how we walk through it. Together," Clara said firmly. "Whatever comes." His hand found hers, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the rain transform the desert. This had become their way, stolen moments of peace between the endless running, the constant vigilance. At night they spread their bedrolls side by side, propriety be damned. During the day's travels they rode close enough to share observations about plants and tracks and weather signs. The band might not fully accept her, but they'd stopped trying to separate them. Voices approached through the rain, Apache voices raised in greeting. Kuruk had returned. Clara felt Dakota tense beside her, though his expression remained neutral. They rose together to meet whatever news came with his brother. Kuruk entered the cave like a storm himself, water streaming from his hair and clothes. His warriors followed, equally drenched but grimly satisfied. The entire band gathered, sensing the importance of this moment. "The southern passes are closed," Kuruk announced without preamble. "Soldiers at every crossing. They've built a new fort at Eagle Springs, positioned to watch all routes to Mexico." Murmurs of dismay rippled through the group. Mexico had been their hope, their escape from the tightening noose of army control. "What of the eastern paths?" asked Dahlia. "Watched. They know our patterns now." Kuruk's gaze found Clara, held it with deliberate meaning. "Someone taught them well." "Enough," Dakota said sharply. "Clara risked everything to warn us. We've had this argument." "Have we? Because I see our escape routes closing while she sits among us, learning our ways, watching our movements." Kuruk stepped closer. "How convenient that soldiers block every path except back toward her precious town." Clara stood, anger overcoming caution. "You think I planned this? That I gave up my family, my entire life, as part of some elaborate trap? I think white women are raised on lies the way Apache children are raised on truth. Perhaps you believe your own deception." "Kuruk," an elder's voice cut through the tension. Joseph Crow Feather, oldest of their band, rarely spoke in council anymore. When he did, all listened. "Look at me." The old man's clouded eyes found Kuruk with unsettling accuracy. "I have lived through 4 wars with the whites. I have seen treachery that would turn your blood to dust. But I have also seen truth, rare as rain in drought years." He gestured toward Clara. "This one carries truth in her spirit. The spirits themselves whisper it to those who listen." "The spirits can be deceived." "Can they?" Joseph's weathered face creased in what might have been amusement. "Then let us test it. The old way. Let the desert itself judge her heart." Dakota stepped forward. "Grandfather, that's not necessary." "Isn't it?" Joseph's voice gentled. "Your woman, yes, I call her that. For all can see what you pretend to hide, stands accused of treachery. Let her face the trial. Let the land decide if she belongs with us or against us. Clara's mouth went dry. She'd heard whispers of the trial by desert, a sacred ordeal where the accused must survive alone for 3 days with only what the land provided. Those judged false by the spirits never returned. "I'll do it," she said before Dakota could protest further. All eyes turned to her. She saw surprise in some faces, respect in others, and something like hope in Dahlia's weathered features. "Clara, no." Dakota's voice was rough. "You don't understand. I understand that your people will never accept me while this shadow hangs between us." She touched his arm gently. "Let me do this. Trust me, as I've trusted you." The rain had stopped, leaving the desert washed clean and gleaming. Joseph nodded slowly. "At first light, then. The spirits are most honest in the morning." That night, Dakota held her closer than propriety allowed, there in the cave surrounded by his people. No one commented. Even Karuk kept his distance, though his eyes burned with unreadable emotions. "The trial isn't just about survival," Dakota whispered against her hair. "The desert tests you, shows you truths you might not want to see. Some who return are changed beyond recognition." "I've already been changed," Clara reminded him. "The moment I saw you in that canyon, everything I thought I knew shifted. This is just making it official." He pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw the words he wouldn't speak aloud. Not yet, not with ears all around, but she heard them anyway, felt them in the desperate way he held her, in the tremor of his hands as they mapped her face like a man memorizing water before drought. Dawn came too soon. Joseph led the procession to a vast stretch of desert, empty save for scattered rocks and hardy plants. The storm had left shallow pools that would disappear by noon, returning the land to its usual thirsty state. 3 days, Joseph intoned. No food save what the desert gives, no water save what you find, no shelter save what you build. If you are false, the land will know. If you are true, it will sustain you. They took everything, her knife, her clothes, save for a simple shift. Her boots. Clara stood barefoot on the warming sand, feeling more naked than her state of undress warranted. Dakota stepped forward, breaking protocol, pressing something into her hand. The turquoise bird, warm from his skin. "The spirits already know you," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "This is just to remind them." Karuk made a disgusted sound, but Joseph smiled. "It is permitted. One token of truth to carry. Now go, child. Walk until you can no longer see us, then let the desert teach you what you need to know." Clara met Dakota's eyes one last time, drawing strength from the faith she saw there. Then she turned and walked into the vast emptiness, feeling the weight of many gazes on her back. The sand burned her feet at first, but she found paths of cooler earth, lizard highways between the scattered stones. As the band disappeared behind her, swallowed by distance and heat shimmer, Clara felt the first real fingers of fear. She was alone in a land that killed the unprepared, with nothing but wit and will to sustain her. But as she pressed the turquoise bird to her chest, feeling its smooth comfort, she remembered Dakota's words from months ago. The desert teaches those who listen. Time to prove she'd learned how to hear. The sun climbed higher and Clara walked on, leaving the known world behind with each step. Somewhere ahead lay truth or death. She intended to find the former, return to the man who waited, and finally silence the voices that called her stranger. The desert stretched endlessly before her, but for the first time since choosing this path, Clara felt no fear, only purpose, sharp and clear as the morning light that turned the whole world to gold and shadow and possibility. The gunfire started at dawn on Clara's 3rd day in the desert. She'd survived the trial, found water in hidden springs, eaten cactus fruit and mesquite pods, built shelter from sun and cold. The desert had tested her with scorching days and freezing nights, with mirages that promised water and delivered only sand. But she'd endured, and this morning she was making her way back to where the band waited. Then the shots echoed across the canyon, and her blood turned to ice. She ran toward the sound, bare feet tough as leather now, the turquoise bird clutched in her fist. The shift she wore was torn and stained, her hair wild with wind and sand, but she moved with new knowledge of the land's secret paths. The scene that greeted her stopped her heart. The band was under attack. Soldiers in dusty blue uniforms had found their camp, caught them in the narrow canyon with nowhere to run. She saw Dakota and Kuruk fighting back to back, all animosity forgotten in the face of shared danger. Dahlia sheltered children behind fallen rocks, while warriors tried to hold a defensive line. And there, directing the soldiers with cold efficiency, stood her brother Samuel. Clara's knees nearly buckled. He wore a scout's uniform now, his face hard with purpose as he pointed out Apache positions to the soldiers. This was how they'd been found. Her own brother had learned to track from their father, just as she had. A child's scream pierced the air as bullets struck too close to the hidden ones. Something savage and protective roared to life in Clara's chest. These were her people now, proved by desert trial and her own choice. She would not watch them die. Moving like the shadow walker the desert had taught her to be, Clara circled the battle, finding higher ground. The soldiers had left their horses below, guarded by only 2 men. An idea formed, desperate, likely fatal, but the only chance she saw. She descended silent as a hunting cat, using every skill Dakota had taught her. The first guard never saw her coming. The rock in her hand struck true, dropping him unconscious. The second turned at the sound, but Clara was already moving, throwing sand in his eyes before sweeping his legs. He fell hard, head striking stone, and lay still. The horses stirred nervously at the scent of violence. Clara spoke to them in the mixture of English and Apache she'd developed, her voice carrying the calm authority she'd learned from watching Dakota with his mount. They settled, and she quickly cut their tethers. Then, with a wild cry that would have done any Apache warrior proud, she fired the guard's pistol into the air and sent the entire herd stampeding toward the canyon. The thunder of hooves echoed off stone walls. Soldiers dove aside as their own mounts charged through their lines, destroying their formation. In the chaos, Clara saw the Apache warriors press their advantage, driving the scattered soldiers back. But Samuel had spotted her. His face went white, then red with rage as he realized what his dead sister had done. He raised his rifle, and for a heartbeat, Clara stared down its barrel at the brother she'd once loved. The shot never came. Kuruk appeared behind Samuel like a ghost, striking the rifle aside before wrestling him to the ground. The 2 men grappled viciously, but Kuruk was the stronger fighter. Soon he had Samuel pinned, knife at his throat. "No!" Clara ran toward them. "Kuruk, please!" The warrior looked up at her, and she saw the moment of decision in his eyes. Here was his chance. Kill the white scout who'd led soldiers to them, who happened to be the corrupting woman's brother. Perfect revenge. "He's your blood," Kuruk said, voice rough with battle fury. "As these are mine." He gestured to the Apache families emerging from cover. "Choose." It wasn't really a choice. It had been decided the moment she'd seen children under fire, but Clara knelt beside them, meeting Samuel's shocked gaze. "Hello, brother," she said quietly. "I'm not dead, as you can see." "Clara," his voice cracked. "What have you... You're dressed like a savage. You're helping them. I'm helping my family." She touched Kuruk's wrist gently, and after a long moment, he eased the knife away from Samuel's throat. "Just as you're helping yours, we've chosen different sides of the same war. They've corrupted you, bewitched you. That Apache, Dakota's voice cut in as he approached, bloodied but walking, showed her more honor in 3 months than your town showed our people in 3 generations. Samuel's eyes went wide as he took in the protective way Dakota stood near Clara, the wordless communication between them. "You're his woman. My sister is an Apache's." "Choose your words carefully," Clara warned, steel in her voice. "I've spent 3 days alone in the desert, earning my place here. I've bled for these people as they've bled for me. I am what I choose to be." The surviving soldiers were retreating, leaderless without their scout. Some Apache warriors moved to pursue, but Joseph Crowfeather's voice stopped them. "Let them go. We have what we came for." The elder approached, studying Clara with those unseeing eyes that saw everything. "The desert has spoken. You survived. You returned. And in our hour of need, you fought for us." He smiled. "Welcome home, daughter." The words broke something in Clara. She'd passed the trial, proved herself, but it was the attack that had truly sealed her place. When forced to choose between the world of her birth and the world of her heart, she hadn't hesitated. "What do we do with him?" Karuk asked, hauling Samuel to his feet. Clara looked at her brother, really looked at him. Saw the fear beneath the rage, the confusion of finding his dead sister alive and transformed. He was still her blood, despite everything. "Let him go," she said. "Let him carry word back that Clara Whitlow is dead. A woman named Clara Walking Rain lives now, and she stands with the Apache." Dakota's hand found hers, warm and solid and right. She'd earned her Apache name during the trial, Walking Rain, for the storm that had marked her first day and the tears that had fallen as she'd made peace with her choice. "You'll hang for this," Samuel spat. "When the army finds out, the army will find empty canyons and ghost trails," Karuk interrupted. "We know now that staying near your towns means death. We go deeper into the mountains, where white men fear to follow." He looked at Clara then, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw acceptance in his gaze. "You fought well, sister. Perhaps my brother's vision wasn't as clouded as I believed." It was as close to an apology as she'd ever get, and Clara accepted it with a nod. They released Samuel after taking his weapons and boots. He'd make it back to the fort, but slowly and with ample time to think. As he limped away, he turned back once. "Mother mourns you every day," he called. "Thomas keeps your garden alive, hoping you'll return." The words were knives. But Clara stood firm. "Tell them I found where I belong. Tell them I'm happy, if they can believe such a thing." Samuel stared at her a moment longer, his sister transformed into something he couldn't understand, then continued his painful journey back to his world. As the band quickly broke camp, preparing to flee deeper into the protective mountains, Dakota drew Clara aside. "You saved us," he said simply. "When you could have stayed hidden, stayed safe, you chose to fight." "I chose us," Clara corrected. "Every day, I choose us." He kissed her then, there in the morning light with the taste of battle still sharp in the air. It was a claiming and a promise, witnessed by the desert that had tested and approved her. When they parted, Dahlia approached with a bundle. "Your trial clothes," the healer said with dry humor. "But I think these suit you better now." It was Apache women's clothing, soft deerskin dress, leggings, moccasins that would protect her feet on the long journey ahead. Clara accepted them gratefully, understanding the gift they represented. Full acceptance, earned in blood and trust. As she changed behind a screen of blankets, she heard Karuk organizing the retreat, his voice carrying new respect when he assigned her a place in the formation. She would ride with the women and children, but armed now, trusted to defend as well as be defended. The turquoise bird hung around her neck on a leather cord Dakota had braided while she was gone. It caught the light as the band moved out, a small blue promise against the vast uncertainty ahead. They climbed higher into the mountains as the sun reached its zenith, leaving the sight of battle behind. Clara didn't look back. That world, Samuel's world, Silver Creek's world, was closed to her now. But riding beside Dakota, surrounded by people who'd bled for her as she'd bled for them, Clara felt no grief for what was lost, only gratitude for what was found. A love worth crossing impossible boundaries, a family worth fighting for, a life worth every sacrifice. The desert had tested her and found her true. Now the mountains would shelter them, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Apache and white woman no longer, but simply two people who'd found home in each other despite a world determined to keep them apart. The hidden valley lay cradled between towering peaks, a secret place where springs bubbled clear and cold, where ancient pines provided shelter from prying eyes. For 3 months now, this had been home to Dakota's band, the remnants who'd chosen the uncertainty of freedom over the slow death of reservation life. Clara sat by the central fire, her hands working automatically as she ground herbs with Dahlia. The rhythm of stone on the stone had become meditation, a way to quiet the memories that sometimes overwhelmed her. 6 months since she'd walked away from her old life. 6 months of learning to be Apache in all but blood. "Your thoughts fly far today," Dahlia observed, adding dried juniper to their medicine stores. "I dreamed of my mother last night," Clara admitted. "She was calling my name, but when I answered, she couldn't hear me." The older woman nodded knowingly. The space between worlds is wide. Dreams try to bridge it, but some crossings can only be made in one direction. Dakota approached from the horse lines, and Clara's heart still quickened at the sight of him. Weathered by wind and sun, marked by new scars from their running battles with pursuit, he remained the most beautiful thing in her transformed world. "Scouts report army patrols to the south," he said, crouching beside them. "But they're moving away, following false trails Karuk laid." Karuk had become their master of deception, leading soldiers on wild chases while the band moved like smoke through the mountains. The brothers had found balance in their shared purpose. Dakota, the voice of careful wisdom. Karuk, the sword when needed. "How long can we keep running?" Clara asked quietly. "As long as the mountains stand," Dakota replied, but she heard the weariness beneath his confidence. Their band grew smaller with each season. Some lost to skirmishes, others slipping away to attempt reservation life, choosing surrender over constant flight. That night the band gathered for council. Joseph Crow Feather, frailer now but still sharp as winter wind, spoke first. "The young ones need teaching," he said. "Our ways, our stories, our medicine. Who will carry these forward if we spend all our strength on running?" "Better to die free than live in cages," Karuk argued, but with less fire than before. Even he felt the weight of their losses. "There is another way," a voice said from the shadows. Clara startled as a figure emerged, a white man, but dressed in mixed fashion like a traitor. Dakota's hand went to his weapon, but the stranger raised empty palms. "Peace, friends. I bring an offer from some who sympathize with your plight." "So," the man introduced himself as Josiah Mills, a former missionary who'd lost faith in forcing conversion but found new purpose in helping displaced peoples. He spoke of hidden valleys further north, places where small bands might live unnoticed, where sympathetic traders would bring supplies without asking questions. "Why help us?" Karuk demanded. "Because I've seen what reservation life does to proud peoples. Because some of us remember that this was all your land first." His eyes found Clara. "And because the love that bridges two worlds deserves a chance to flourish." The council debated through the night. By dawn, consensus emerged. They would scout these northern valleys, seek a place to root rather than simply run. It meant risk, meant trusting this stranger's word. But the alternative was slow extinction through attrition. As the band prepared to move, Clara found a moment alone with Dakota at their watchpost overlooking the valley. The morning painted the peaks in shades of rose and gold, beauty that made her chest ache with its transience. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Always," he admitted. "Fear keeps us alive. But more than fear, I feel." He paused, searching for words. "I feel the weight of keeping you safe. Sometimes I wonder if I was selfish, letting you choose this life." Clara turned to face him fully. "Do you remember what you said that night in the canyon, when I asked if you liked me?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "I remember. You said enough to take you now, but you didn't take me, Dakota. I gave myself. Every day I give myself. This life, these people, you, it's not a prison. It's freedom of a kind I never knew existed." He pulled her close, and she breathed in the scent of him, sage and leather and home. "When we find this new place," he murmured against her hair, "we'll speak the words before the people. Make true what everyone already knows. Marriage, Apache style. No church bells or white dress, but sacred all the same." Clara's heart swelled with fierce joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." The journey north took 2 weeks through passes Clara hadn't known existed. Mills proved true to his word, guiding them along hidden paths, through territories where native bands and Mexican traders had created a shadow world beyond government reach. When they finally crested the last ridge and saw the valley spread below, wide and green, with fresh water and natural fortifications, Clara heard Dahlia breathe a prayer of thanks. Even Karuk's perpetual scowl softened. "It's beautiful," someone whispered. "It's home," Joseph corrected, and Clara felt the truth of it settle into her bones. They made camp that first night under stars that seemed closer here, as if the mountains held them in cupped palms. Dakota and Clara stood before the gathered band as Joseph spoke the old words that bound them as husband and wife. Karuk himself offered the blessing, his acceptance complete at last. "You fought as Apache," he told Clara. "You suffered as Apache. Now you love as Apache. My brother chose well." The ceremony was simple. Exchanges of gifts, promises spoken to earth and sky, the sharing of food that symbolized shared life. But when Dakota wrapped the marriage blanket around them both, Clara felt the profound weight of belonging, of being claimed and claiming in return. Later, in their own dwelling, a traditional wickiup Dakota had built with careful hands, they lay entwined, listening to night sounds of their new home. Somewhere, an owl called, and Clara smiled, remembering that long-ago signal that had started everything. "Do you ever regret?" Dakota asked in the darkness. "Never," Clara answered. "I found something worth more than safety or acceptance or the life I was supposed to live. I found truth. I found you." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and they spoke without words of all the tomorrows they would face together. Morning brought work, shelters to build, hunting territories to scout, defenses to establish. Mills had left them with supplies and promises of trade routes that would keep them connected to necessities without exposure. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this life was easy. But as Clara worked alongside the women, as she watched children play without fear for the first time in months, as she caught Dakota's eye across the camp and saw her own contentment mirrored there, she knew they'd found something precious. A place where Apache and White could simply be people, where love wasn't bounded by blood or birth, where the desert's lessons and mountain's shelter created space for lives that shouldn't exist but did. That night, the band gathered around the fire for stories. Joseph spoke of ancestors and spirits, of the long history that had brought them to this moment. When he finished, he turned to Clara. "Now you," he said, "tell us the story of the woman who crossed worlds for love." Clara looked around the circle, at faces that had gone from suspicious to accepting to beloved. At Kuruk, who nodded encouragement. At Dahlia, who smiled like a proud mother. At Dakota, whose eyes held promises of all their tomorrows. She began to speak, her voice carrying across the fire-lit circle. She told of a girl bound by fear and convention, of a chance meeting that shattered assumptions, of love that grew despite every reason it shouldn't. She spoke of choices and consequences, of bridges built and burned, of finding home in the last place expected. When she finished, the silence was profound. Then, one by one, voices rose in the traditional response to a story well told. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. "Look," Dakota whispered, pointing skyward. Above them, across the star-drunk sky, a streak of blue flashed and disappeared. A mountain bluebird, impossible at this height, at this hour. But there it was, a sign, a blessing, a reminder that some things transcended ordinary understanding. Clara reached for the turquoise bird at her throat, feeling its smooth warmth. The girl who'd followed bluebirds into a canyon was gone. In her place stood Clara Walking Rain, wife of Dakota, daughter of the people, keeper of stories that bridged two worlds. And in this hidden valley, under stars that blessed impossible love, she was finally, fully, home. Thank you all for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic stories of love, courage, and adventure from the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Clara and Dakota's journey. Did their love touch your heart as it touched mine? Let me know what you think.